Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio right after the Women's World Cup match. I hope you enjoyed that. So this week we've been a little staggered on the program, delayed until after the coverage. So we appreciate you joining us at a different time this morning. We'll be back on our normal schedule on Friday. That'll be a 7 o'clock start. So we've got a lot to cover. I'm glad that we only missed a couple minutes. Lately, it's been about 15 minutes after the hour. Now, we're starting almost at the top of the hour. So, as always, you can contact me right there. We've been receiving a lot of great responses to whether it's the Hunter Biden case and the plea deal falling apart, or whether it's now Trump, another indictment, this time on 4 counts, which we're going to talk about this morning. I'd love to have you weigh in on it. We're going to take a look at both sides of this, how the media is responding to the Trump indictment, how Republicans are responding, as well as how, I guess you could say, I don't know if you want to say anti-Trump, or people that obviously are not fans of the former president, what they had to say about it. Also, I want to highlight we have not, because of the delay in the program until after the Women's World Cup match coverage, we have not lined up any guests during the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. We want to thank M.A. Neal Financial Services for being a part of that segment. But on Friday, I'll be back with guests, and we have 2 guests, it looks like right now, which I will highlight on tomorrow's program when the second guest is officially set in stone. I will say that Georgia Verdier will be one of the guests. She is the president of the local NAACP. She is also the newest inductee into the Steuben County Hall of Fame. So we're going to talk about that ceremony, how you can nominate someone for that in the future. That's coming up on Friday. Okay, let's get right to it before we take our, well, I guess you would say second break, but kind of our first break. So the former president, the third indictment, brought in, let's see, this is the, let me word that differently. This is the third indictment brought in just 4 months, in that 4-month window. Trump, this one consists of 4 counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. I can put it up on the screen, but it doesn't really fit. So you'll see there, that's the official documentation. The 45th president faces up to 55 years in prison if convicted of all charges. So again, this is the third indictment brought in just 4 months. However, though, even if he is found guilty, this is kind of fascinating, Trump can still contest the 2024 presidential election, in which he is the front runner. It's kind of interesting that this information, or not information, this indictment came out as the polls, and they were making a big deal about this yesterday, the polls show that not only is he the front runner on the Republican ticket, that if the election were held today, he would defeat President Biden. So it's interesting, and I'm not saying conspiracy or anything. That's just, as you read this, you could be looking at a man that, even if he's found guilty, is running for president and could ultimately win. Now, some might say the polls show it neck and neck against Biden. Either way, this is a fascinating turn of events. Now, it says here that the special counsel Jack Smith gave a quick press conference, took no questions from reporters, but said the attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Now, the Trump campaign did weigh in on it. We're going to tell you about that when we come back. I don't want to run too late. I'm excited to have a full show here. So stay with us. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're talking about the Trump indictment, the third in just 4 months against the former president. So you can, as always, weigh in on that. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I want to thank you for everybody who's either reached out this way or just seen me on the street and that have stayed tuned after the Women's World Cup match to watch the program an hour later. I know it changes your schedule a little bit, so I appreciate your dedication and your loyalty, because we did not have a program yesterday because it was so late, but we had a great one on Monday, and I think today is going to be a good one because we have so much to cover. I also want to remind you that tonight is that big concert at the 181st Annual Chemung County Fair. That's Parmalee. That is tonight. It's not too late to get tickets. There's a few left, but I know this is going to be a big success. It sounds like it's going to be beautiful weather for it. So Parmalee again tonight at the 181st Annual Chemung County Fair, and that runs, not the concert of course, but the fun of the fair runs all week long. And next week on the program, we'll be talking with some representatives from the Steuben County Fair, because that's coming up in just 2 weeks. All right, back to the news of the day. And I hope that you'll see in just a little bit that the coverage is different here on Frankly Speaking than you'll get elsewhere. It seems to be, as you've seen, kind of a one lane. And I actually have some examples of that, of how the media's handled this. I think there's normally a bias in the media. That's why I saw a report earlier today that people aren't watching the news quite as much. And I thought, well, we're lucky here on Big Fox because you have two trusted outlets. You have Frankly Speaking in the morning, then you have Big Fox News at 10, two outlets that you can trust. I think the media, the news media, will not accept the fact that they are becoming less and less trusted because of the bias, because of how they've covered things like, for instance, Hunter Biden, where if you look at the New York Times, they're basically doing the nothing to see here. This has already been talked about. This has already been covered extensively, yet they never covered it. So if you really do not know very often what's going on if you just watch certain mainstream media outlets, because they refuse to cover things that they think negatively affect, I would say, their chosen candidate. That's why a lot of people have been upset with these indictments, that are always some big news story against Trump, against another indictment, some legal issue, again, always comes out when there's bad news for Biden. And there's a trend there that is actually pretty evident once you become aware of it. So back to the information on this. As I said, the Trump campaign did release a statement saying this is nothing more than the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 elections. I should have put that up on the screen there for you. With the weaponization of the Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, in which President Trump is the undisputed frontrunner and leading by substantial margins. But why did they wait 2.5 years to bring these charges? Right in the middle of President Trump's winning campaign for 2024 is the question that they've asked. And then Trump went to his Truth Social, and he said, I hear, this was before the actual indictment came out, he said, I hear that deranged Jack Smith, in order to interfere with the presidential election of 2024, will be putting out yet another fake indictment of your favorite president, me, at 5 p.m. Why didn't they do this 2.5 years ago? Why did they wait so long? Because they wanted to put it right in the middle of my campaign. Prosecutorial misconduct, exclamation point. He continued, and we'll take that off the screen. Also, why are they putting out another fake indictment the day after crooked Joe Biden's scandal, one of the biggest in American history, broke out in the halls of Congress? He wrote, and he finished by saying, a nation in decline. So there's also co-conspirators in this election interference indictment. We're going to take a look at that, a look at the judge. But I did think it was interesting when he said that about whenever there's bad news about President Biden, specifically Hunter Biden, that there does seem to be some type of charge brought up on Trump. I would like to get your take on that. I thought I had a piece here that kind of highlighted the examples of that. Maybe we'll mention that a little bit later on because I want to give you basically the opinions on both sides of this. Or when I say opinions, the comments, you do have a lot in the media, a lot on the left that are celebrating and I think that's unfortunate because no matter what you think of the former president, I think you should take a step back and say, what does this, how does this reflect on the country? How does this reflect on a foreign stage if they're looking at this? How does this, as a time when everybody says it, how divided we are as a nation, does this help heal the divide? No, obviously, the answer is no. So I think no matter what your opinion of the former president is and how he handled the election loss, is this the right avenue to go down during, again, election season? I know next year's election year, but this election season, does this play, and I know I mentioned this before, does this end up playing into the former president's hands? What I mean is, and I've quoted this a million times now, but I thought it was such a good point. The former congressman was on the program, Joe Semplinsky, and he said, there's people out there that don't like Trump, maybe don't want to vote for Trump, but they really hate the deep state. And when does this start to reek like the deep state? Coming off the heels of that sweetheart plea deal that Hunter Biden was to receive, that people didn't even realize how sweetheart of a deal it was with a blanket immunity. I think a lot of people were outraged over that on a whole different front. And then you combine that with what's happening with the former president. It's going to, well, again, I think I don't want to use the term play into his hands. I'm sure he doesn't want it, but it's one of those things that you will see higher polling. You will see fundraising numbers go up for the former president because people really dislike the deep state. They're starting to more and more question the Department of Justice, whether it's being weaponized, FBI, whether it's being weaponized. So we're going to take a look at the judge here when we come back, the co-conspirators. I'm just going to name who the media believe the co-conspirators are in this case, and then we're going to get into the, I guess you could say, talking points from those on both sides. That's when we come back, but as always, reach out to me. I would rather highlight your talking point than someone in the media. So contact me right there. You can leave me a voicemail, you can text, or you can email. All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I want to thank you for watching Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Let's take a quick look at the co-conspirators. Again, they're not being charged with any crimes, but this is what CNN and I believe New York Post came to the conclusion of who they are. Co-conspirator one, former lawyer, former mayor of New York City, former, what do they call America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, co-conspirator one. Co-conspirator two, former Trump lawyer John Eastman. Then you look ahead to co-conspirator number three, Trump lawyer Sidney Powell. Number four is Justice Department official, former Justice Department official, of course, Jeffrey Clark. Then you have pro-Trump lawyer Kenneth Chesebro. And then the identity of the co-conspirator number six is unclear, so there's some speculation there of who it could be. Now I want to take a look at the judge. This is going to be interesting to watch how this is reacted to, of course, again, coming after that great sweetheart plea deal that Hunter Biden was receiving. That's not to do whataboutism. I'm just saying what the perspective is. So let's see what we have here from the judge in this case. Considered one of the toughest punishers of the January 6th rioters, even at times going stronger with the judgment than was even recommended or suggested. Chutkan has handed out tougher sentences than the Justice Department was seeking in 7 cases, matched its request in 4 others, and sent all 11 riot defendants who have come before her behind bars. In the 4 cases in which prosecutors did not seek jail time, Chutkan gave terms ranging from 14 days to 45 days. Now, this obviously could spell a little bit of trouble for the former president. Chutkan jailed despite prosecutors not asking for it. An Ohio couple who climbed through a broken window of the U.S. Capitol and live streamed a video of themselves inside. So now charges not even asked for. Jailed. The 61-year-old judge was nominated by President Barack Obama and was technically confirmed by the Senate without opposition after a more contentious 54-40 cloture vote. She was born in Jamaica, graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's law school. Her resume includes a previous job that could attract some significant attention. Well, and I say that it will in certain circles, right? She worked at the law firm, I'm going to try here, Boies, Schiller, Flexner from 2002 until she was confirmed as a federal judge back in 2014. Now, that's according to her biography that she submitted to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, the reason this is going to draw a lot of attention from a lot of people, Boies Schiller has strong connections to the Democrat Party, and then second son, Hunter Biden, whose dad, President Biden, is likely to face Trump in 2024. Of course, that's what the New York Post says. What was of counsel at the firm from 2009 to 2014. Now, it's not known if they associated, if they knew each other necessarily, but that is something that's kind of interesting when we talk, again, not whataboutism, but when we talk about the difference and we talk about the deep state-esque issues with the Hunter Biden case, all kind of fascinating how, I guess you could say it's a small world, that could be the case. Okay. So I mentioned earlier, and the former president mentioned it in his Truth Social post, but it is fascinating that when there is bad news that comes out about Biden, whether it be Hunter or Joe, either the day that happens or the day after, Trump is indicted. As a matter of fact, Guy Benson predicted this 2 days ago by tweeting out, if the writers really stick to the plot art this season, the Biden DOJ is totally going to indict Trump again tomorrow, aren't they? And of course, that ultimately did happen. So special counsel Jack Smith's indictment of the former president matched what has become a familiar pattern. And I'll mention this in case you haven't been paying attention, and I'm not going to go through all examples of it. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4. But on Tuesday, Smith filed his indictment against Trump relating to his attempts to contest the 2020 presidential election. We know that part. The indictment came the day after former Hunter Biden business associate Devon Archer testified at the House Oversight Committee that Hunter Biden had put his father on the telephone with Hunter's business associates, that Hunter Biden had been hired by Burisma to influence then Vice President Joe Biden to stop a prosecutor, and that Hunter Biden had made money from China. So that comes out. And again, the media is not covering that extensively. As a matter of fact, if you look at, and there's a really good piece on this, and we may get to it later on if I can find it, but basically the thought is, the thought is, everybody forgets I'm live on the air. Good morning.
Good morning.
But if you look at the media's coverage, and there's a really good piece of the New York Post, as I was saying, that Hunter Biden's coverage is basically nothing to see here, nothing to report on, even though they didn't report on it initially, and this is such a tried and true method, even though they didn't report on it initially, they say, oh, that's all been covered before, that's all been talked about, that's all been discussed, it's old news, even if they didn't specifically cover it at all, like the New York Times is a prime example. So let's take a look, before we go to break, just quickly, let's take a look at what Democrats, kind of these never Trumpers, as they were called at one time, Republicans, what they were saying, because there's always, and again, I don't want to keep belaboring this point, but I think it's unfortunate that people celebrate this action against the former president, and I say that because I want you to think of what this will do just for the picture of America right now, whether you're looking at it from maybe our adversaries and our allies watching this. You've got a lot of people questioning the legitimacy of it, or perhaps that there's been a weaponization, and this kind of the DOJ and elsewhere, that this kind of just divides the country even more at a time when we are in great divide. I'm not saying that. Everybody's saying that. how often do we see that news report that the country's hasn't been this divided since the Civil War? Or what you've seen it. It's almost cliche now. It's when they're in need of a story. But I do think it is fascinating when you think about how could you divide this country even more. Well, I would say alienate half of the country, people that supported Trump, make them question the legitimacy of the DOJ, and start to really focus on the deep state. And it's just yet another way that we continue to get more divided, get into our tribes, essentially. And I think it's a very troubling scenario for the future of our country, the future for, and how often I've talked about in this program, people losing faith in patriotism, losing faith in their religion, losing faith in community. And we try to focus on bring the community back together. Well, how do you build a community when it's unfortunately so divided? I'm not saying we're giving up. I'm not saying that at all. I think if anything, we've proven time and time again on this program that we're going the opposite way. We still have faith in community. We have faith in faith, and we have faith in patriotism and faith in the country. We just have to, unfortunately, work at it more and more every day, and work on it probably a lot more than we thought we would have to work on it. So Adam Schiff, and this is who we'll start with, and then we'll go take a break and talk more about it. Some of the what Democrats, again, and never Trump people have to say. We'll talk about the media. We'll talk about some Republican comments, some of the former president, Donald Trump's opponents in the 2024 race, what they had to say. But first, Adam Schiff, who was obviously one that a lot of people still upset, going back to the deep state idea of his lies about Russia. But he said Trump was just indicted by federal prosecutors for trying to overturn the 2020 election. We're coming toward an inflection point and a fraught moment in the history of our democracy. But frankly, considering the interests of justice and the rule of law, it's about, and I'm going to skip his cuss word, it's about time. That's from Adam Schiff. He's running for Senate, right? No surprise that he's gloating. But he even admits in an odd way that this isn't good for the country, unless I'm reading this wrong. We're coming towards an inflection point and a fraught moment in the history of our democracy. Yeah, at a time when this could get very troubling for the history of our democracy because of the division, is the way I look at it. I'm sure, they always say that Trump's a threat to democracy. Maybe that's what he means. But frankly, considering the interest of justice and the rule of law, it's about time. I don't know. Someone had a good point that people in the media, people on the left, hate Trump so much they don't mind what it does to the country when they do things like this. That's why they didn't mind when they were pushing the Russian hoax. It's all very interesting how far some are willing to go for the end game. So we're going to talk about that, their end game, that is. We're going to talk about that when we come back. We're just a tad bit late, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Thank you for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So before we get back into what some of the comments are on both sides of the issue when it comes to President Trump's indictment, we received a few viewer comments real quickly. This is a great question that I don't have an answer to. But the charges that were brought against Trump yesterday, has anybody else in this country ever been charged with the same crimes? I think that'd be interesting to know. I don't have a 100% answer for you. I don't believe so. I believe I saw an article earlier that said as much, but I don't want you to quote me on that. And I'll try to find out more for you to get you an exact answer in case you want to tell other people that. Also, this person that wrote, I heard that they use some of the same things against the Ku Klux Klan to bring them down. I'm assuming that means, yeah, that's could very well be. If anybody has the answer to that, I'll continue to do my research. I just read this during the break, so I don't have the answers, but thank you for reaching out. Also, this coming from someone else, a completely different viewer. I don't want people to confuse the two. If this administration successfully outlaws protesting against election results, I'm afraid it may take a civil war to take our country back. You hear that sometimes. I hope we're not that divided. I feel that we're getting very, very divided. which is an understatement. I hope, obviously, never comes to that. And I think we all hope and pray that that is not the case. We also have another comment here. If Biden is reelected for a second term, the deep state will have manipulated the U.S. into a banana republic. That is a very interesting point as well. So thank you, by the way, for everybody who changed their schedule this morning and continue to watch the program after the Women's World Cup match. So I appreciate that. We will be back to a normal time on Friday, and then we're good at 7 o'clock for quite some time. But I appreciate you moving your schedule around. And as always, you can continue to weigh in on what we had to say. So we mentioned what Adam Schiff had to say about this. I thought it was also worth mentioning the kind of, at one time they were called Never Trumpers, which were Republicans that didn't support Trump. Adam Kissinger, and this is what I mean about dividing the country even further. Let me know what you think about the wording in this, the language from Adam Kissinger, the former representative. Donald Trump is an actual traitor, a Benedict Arnold, stain on history. On the January 6th committee, we uncovered proof that Donald Trump not only knew what was happening at the Capitol, but encouraged it. He is a cancer on our democracy. Today is the beginning of justice. Nobody is above the law, least of all a president who swore an oath to defend it. So that's the rhetoric from Adam Kissinger. And some of this looks like more gloating because Adam Kissinger ended up not being a representative anymore because of his opposition to Trump, and it cost him in the long run. So it's interesting to see almost a glee from someone like Adam Kissinger in words that should mean a lot. Calling someone a traitor, calling someone a Benedict Arnold, a stain on history, a cancer on our democracy. And saying that with such, again, glee is the only word I can think of for something that is obviously so troubling in the long run for our country, one way or another. No matter what happens when the smoke clears on this, no matter if the former president is found guilty or not, what has this done for the health of the country? MSNBC's Chris Hayes on his program All In, and this is to show you and highlight how the media is responding. Trump indictment lays out the greatest political crime since Civil War secession. I'll tell you a little bit more about what he had to say in just a moment, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back after this short commercial break. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you for joining us at a different hour. Again, I know I keep mentioning it, but we'll be back at our regular time on Friday. We will have a live broadcast tomorrow as well. As soon as the Women's World Cup match coverage is over, we'll be on the air with Frankly Speaking. So please, if you don't mind, continue for one more day, changing your schedule around, but then we will be back at 7 a.m. on Friday. So I mentioned Chris Hayes on MSNBC, and this, again, I think proving the point that I've been mentioning, the excitement. He essentially says it in his last bit of information here. That is in a category of it itself in American history, the Civil War and the death and misery. But this is the greatest political crime since secession, meaning January 6th. And the gravest test that Lincoln called on the battlefield in Gettysburg of whether a nation of, by, and for the people, that we are our own masters, whether that can long endure. So I feel profoundly gratified by reading this document because it calls into question in a way that has not quite been called yet. If the law is not for this, what is it for? So that's how the media is covering it. Andrew McCarthy, we talk about him quite frequently. Sometimes I like his pieces, sometimes I don't. He actually came out with this right before the indictment came down. But he believes, and I'm giving you both sides this morning, that's why I want to highlight that. He says Trump can't win. He believes he doesn't have a prayer being elected president again because of things like this, the indictment. And that's unfortunate if that's his belief, meaning that then did this ultimately succeed. If you believe that a lot of these charges are overhyped or whatever, we're just playing a mind game here. I don't know if you believe that, one way or the other. But if you believe that and then it does cost him the election? Doesn't that just play more into the idea of the deep state? Something to consider. So I'm not going to go through this whole piece. It ends up being like 4 pages, I think. But he said for Republicans to win in 2024, they can't get mesmerized by today's polling. And that's the poll I mentioned earlier that showed that Trump would defeat Joe Biden in the general election. He says it reflects on voter angst against Biden more than it does for support for Trump. You have to assess what the chessboard is going to look like a year from now. If Trump is the nominee, it will look like an onslaught that we are not adequately envisioning now. That is much more worth the effort when drawing conclusions from current polling. I simply don't see how Trump gets to 42% of the electorate. The country's already made up its mind about him. From here, there's no up, only down. If we nominate him again, he's going to get drubbed. I think that's interesting because how many predictions like that, and as I said, I like Andrew McCarthy sometimes. How many predictions like that did we have back in 2016? If you recall, after then President Trump won, a lot of videos came out of the people guaranteeing a loss, that there's no way he would ever win. It's the best thing to happen to Hillary. It's just interesting to read some of these people that say, read the checkboard. I have a fly in here. Read the checkboard, or excuse me, the chessboard. I feel like the people that always say things like that haven't always been so right. You know, they were the ones, this isn't Andrew McCarthy specifically because I don't know where he stood, but those were the people that said Jeb Bush is the only way we'll ever be able to win. Remember that line of reasoning from the Republican Party at the time? Anyway, so let's take a look at what Republicans had to say about this, since we've taken such a long look at the other side. Actually, we're going to do that when we come back from break. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody who've been commenting throughout the program about the Trump indictment. Some of his opponents for the 2024 election have been weighing in on it. Senator Tim Scott, who has seen a little bit of uptick lately, at least in attention. He wrote, I remain concerned about the weaponization of Biden's DOJ and its immense power used against political opponents. And that's been a common theme, even by some of his opponents. Not all, of course. There's the ones like we mentioned earlier with Democrats and specifically those in the media who are giddy over this in a way. But some are questioning the validity of it. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's actually in some polls second in the Republican polling, interesting, kind of came out of nowhere, but maybe it speaks a little bit to how DeSantis hasn't been able to gain any traction. But I like the line that he came up with. This is a politicized prosecution. It is a political persecution through prosecution. Now in a third indictment just in a matter of months against a person who is still at present the lead contender in the Republican primary for U.S. president. And I do think it's interesting because he says very often, yeah, obviously it'd be better for me if the former president wasn't in there. This again, Vivek Ramaswamy, but it's not about politics, and that's what he said. This is about first principles. We do not want to become a country where the party in power is able to use banana republic-like tactics to eliminate its political opponents. Yet, I'm sad to say that's exactly where we are. So now, Elise Stefanik weighing in on this. We'll read this before we go to break. House Republican Conference Chair Elise Stefanik said today is yet another dark day in America as Joe Biden continues to weaponize his corrupt Department of Justice against his leading political opponent, Donald J. Trump. Less than 24 hours ago, Congress heard testimony from Hunter Biden's longtime business partner that Joe Biden joined Hunter's business calls over 20 times. This directly contradicts Biden's lie that he never discussed business with his son. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. So the last couple quick statements. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy highlighted how people have recently been informed that Hunter Biden received money from China, contradicting President Biden's claim that Biden spoke with Hunter's business associates over 20 times. Again, contradicting what the president had said. And then they tried to give Hunter a broad immunity, a secret broad immunity, and admitted the sweetheart deal was unprecedented. And then he highlighted the fact that the new polls show that President Trump is without a doubt Biden's leading political opponent. He charged that everyone in America could see what was going to come next. DOJ's attempt to distract from the news and attack the frontrunner for the Republican nomination, President Trump. House Republicans will continue to uncover the truth about Biden Inc. and the two-tiered system of justice. Steve Scalise said, let's be clear about what's happening. Biden's DOJ is cutting sweetheart deals for Hunter to cover for the Biden family's influence peddling schemes, while at the same time trying to persecute his leading political opponent. It's an outrageous abuse of power. Josh Hawley writing similar. Biden's DOJ unveils the latest effort to stop Trump from running against Biden. Totally unprecedented in American history. Representative Jim Jordan saying, when you drain the swamp fights back. President Trump did nothing wrong. Many people highlighting how many times the former president, Donald Trump, was politically attacked by what they deem the deep state. You know, the Russian collusion, impeachment, January 6th committee, which was a show trial, suppressing and censoring the Hunter Biden laptop, the Mar-a-Lago raid, and this is coming from Representative Claudia Tenney right down the road, Alvin Bragg's phony charges. This is a serial election interference. And one last comment before we wrap things up. Senate GOP Conference Chair John Barrasso slammed this indictment, saying the American people have lost faith in Biden's Justice Department. They are uncomfortable watching the current president weaponize the justice system against his political opponent. The Justice Department's own flimsy deal to save Biden's son didn't even hold up in court. This two-tiered system of justice is wrong. The country deserves better. All right, that is it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to did I push the wrong button? Thank you to everybody who reached out, everybody who had a comment on the program. We will be on again tomorrow, but it's, again, a staggered time. It'll be right after the Women's World Cup coverage. So stay tuned. It should be right around 8:15. So really appreciate you for moving your schedule and still being a part of the program. And then on Friday, we'll have two special guests, and it will be at 7 o'clock, our normal time. So that's it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. We will talk to you tomorrow morning right after Women's World Cup Soccer. Have a great day, everyone.